So we looked at the past a little bit, so looking at the past year, I suppose everybody across the spectrum has probably been a little stunned by what's happened in the past year with California, but then taken away, Connecticut, the Kerrigan decision, Iowa, the Barnum decision, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. How surprised are the two of you about this past years? Victor?
Well, sometimes I talk to people who keep saying, this is like it was 10 years ago. Yep, we're just on the cusp of 5 more states, and I feel like various people who I talk to are incredible optimists, have been saying this for a long time. It's nice to finally see some of it come to fruition. I'll tell you something. I have a very specific memory of being in the Vermont Senate during the whole, I guess it had to be before the Civil Union Bill was passed, and it was considering constitutional amendments, the very same constitutional amendments Beth was talking about, feeling that, the Senate had been locked down and they wouldn't advance something. And I remember these various people standing up and talking, and a lot of them legislators talked about having talked to their children. And their children were like, Mom, Dad, how could you possibly consider doing X? You're not gonna vote against those people, are you? And just how deeply personal it was, and I saw very directly that when you put the question to people in a very real way, it was much closer at hand, that they had a really hard time doing what I would view as the wrong thing. And it really has made me feel ever since then that, if anything, sometimes we're just not aggressive enough in state legislatures in particular. So there was a way in which I was surprised, but I also wasn't. I was part of the team of deciding when to bring this marriage legislation forward in Maine, and everybody thought, you've got to be kidding. And then including, Senate and House leadership, and even though they were with us, but, there's just no way you're gonna make this happen. But then, when you do these legislative campaigns, right, and you have people from their districts calling them, emailing them, and meeting with them, and making the case repeatedly in enormous numbers, it changes the whole landscape, because I think a lot of times, some legislators may believe that there's just not the support out there. So on the one hand, I feel like when it's really close, they'll do the right thing, and you've got to just provide some of that cover and let them know that they actually have the room to do the right thing, because there is support for it. So I can't speak a lot about Iowa, but I know that we've all heard from our colleagues at Bonauto Legal that there's, it's a state that goes its own way, and it seems like it has, and it seems like so far things are sticking. I know it's a fight there, and of course the right wing is there trying to set the stage so that there could be a constitutional amendment vote, but I think we're hanging in. Were you surprised?
Mary sort of has her fingers in so many pots, and so I'm the opposite. I have been in Vermont with somewhat of blinders on. I've learned enough about what's going on in other states not to make a fool of myself in Vermont. So I didn't feel like I had the finger on the pulse in other places. I wasn't surprised at what happened in Vermont, but I may be the only person in Vermont who wasn't surprised at what happened in Vermont. We sat down about 5.5 years ago, with Vermont Freedom to Marry. We'd spent several years after passage of the Civil Union law. And I'm not sure people realize the extent to which we really did have to play defense. In 2002, the Vermont House, after a horrible electoral backlash to the enactment of the Civil Union law in 2000, we had an anti-Civil Union majority come back to the Vermont House, I guess in 2001, and passed a bill to repeal the Civil Union law. The Senate didn't take it up, but it's reflective of how much we were on the defensive. We really didn't get off the defensive until about 2004, and at that point, we sat down and we came up with a strategic plan, and we said, what is the absolute fastest and smartest we can get to marriage in Vermont? And we concluded that it was going to be spring of 2009. So, this didn't come out of nowhere. This was part of a long-term plan. It wasn't, I can tell you, it wasn't legislative leadership's long-term plan. And it wasn't a plan that maybe even some folks within our own inner circle believed. I think some people thought I was just putting that out there as a motivational tool. But that was the plan, and so I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that it got a little rocky at the end, but